Still wondering where Palestine is. But we do know they have rockets. However, we are happy to be here this evening. It is the 17th of October. And as I said, I'm Kevin Hoare, and this is David Darnell. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Welcome, everybody, to tonight's show. I followed the rockets, watching a video of a rocket hitting a Gazan hospital, and the rockets are coming out of Gaza, not Palestine. So I'm still wondering where Palestine is.
Yeah, I know. Just to make it even more confusing. Well, let's go straight into that story because that's what. So the report was immediately. The first report said that it was assumed it was an Israeli rocket that hit a Gaza City hospital. And Just the News, which actually is more of a let's get the facts first operation, just simply said a rocket hits a Gaza City hospital, unconfirmed reports of hundreds dead. And it says here whether the attack was by Israel or misfired rocket by Hamas remains unclear. So that's the first report. And ironically enough, what they usually say is first reports are always false. But they made an effort to make sure that this one wouldn't be false by not making anything up.
Yeah, because the spin is coming hot and heavy from both sides on this.
It is. You can expect that, and that's how wars work. But
especially in the digital age.
In the digital age, what is it? The old saying, lies travel halfway around the world before the truth gets its pants on. So
yeah. Well, the other thing about the digital age is you can watch a video of some backwards ass rocket, which I don't think Israel has any backwards ass rockets.
No.
I think their munitions are very precise. They're guided. But you can watch a video of this backwards ass rocket hitting a target within Gaza.
Yeah, if you want, I don't know if you can post that. That would be great. I haven't got to see it yet, but I have followed the subsequent reports. Here's what happened after that first report. Palestinian President Abbas cancels planned Biden meeting after alleged Israeli strike on a hospital. And so he decided to cancel the meeting with President Brandon, and also going to be with him and other Middle East states because they might actually discuss like how can we de-escalate this, what is going to be our unified response. But he immediately canceled it, and because he said that that authorities in Gaza have blamed Israel for the airstrike, according to the Associated Press. So remember what I just said, according to the Associated Press. All right, fast forward here. Riot erupts in Israeli embassy in Jordan. So right now, only President Abbas has canceled his plan to be part of all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this riot breaks out, and in Amman, Jordan, in Jordan in general, they've had a problem for decades. There's more Palestinians, so whatever that is,
Jordanians,
than there are Jordanians. It's like 60% Palestinian and 40% Jordanian, but it's Jordan. It has a king, the king of Jordan, right?
Yeah.
And so they start rioting. The next headline that you see is that Jordan is calling off the Biden summit with Middle East leaders. So now the host country is saying we're canceling it because a riot broke out in front of the Israeli embassy. Okay. As this story evolves, and remember I said Associated Press, by the way, the reporters of record, as we know. And then what happens next? I'm sort of trying to post these links as we go. Israel, who does actually say when they do hit things and explain it. Said
they actually
Israel
tell
denied.
people before they hit him so they
Yeah.
can evacuate. So
Yes,
innocent.
exactly. That's exactly right. They actually tell people get out because, and that's often because um, Hamas uses civilian buildings, civilians as sort of like human shields. Like they'll actually put a headquarters or an underground bunker for, armaments, or they'll even go on the roof of buildings like hospitals and mosques and fire rockets and missiles from them. They've done that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So Israel goes and tells people, get out of there. Okay. Well, Israeli military says it had no involvement in the explosion that killed hundreds of people in Gaza City Hospital, and that the blast was caused by a misfired Palestinian rocket. So this is reported as of 4:02 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time today. So about 5 hours ago. All these consequences have ensued. All the benefits of trying to kill any attempt to de-escalate what's going on, maybe come up with some sort of discussion, talk, unified front. Of course, it's being engineered by the Brandon administration, but we'll get to them in a second. And not only did Israel come out and explain this, but now you've got this video that shows essentially the Palestinians hitting their own hospital with a rocket.
Yeah, yeah, and so to your point, as all of these plans are canceled, all of these peace talks or whatever is going on are canceled. All done on well, it's a lie.
Yeah.
You would think some credible news organization like Associated Press or something could have put this together.
Well, funny you mention that, because the same thing happened, except just wind the tape back 2 days. Top Associated Press reporter in Gaza is suspended for comparing Israel to Nazis and calling for its fall. He said it's a racist regime that is so similar to the Nazis. I guess he would know, since actually it's been Hamas and all their protests giving Sig Heil salutes and showing swastikas, displaying swastikas. We showed that last week.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Nazis and the Israeli Arabs have at least one thing in common. They both want to eradicate the Jews from the face of the earth.
So this is now in the public record that a guy named Issam Adwan, not just an Associated reporter, but the top Associated Press reporter in Gaza covering the war, was in fact calling for the fall or the destruction of Israel and said that they're Nazis. He has referred to past circumstances as the Palestinian revolt against Israeli oppression, saying will be a triumph sooner than later, no matter how strong or well supported by other tyrants. Every colonial system will be overthrown. So this is a guy who's truly neutral.
Colonial.
And can be candid on for his accurate reporting. And he operated this way for months and months and months. In fact, going all the way back to 2019, he goes, I'm telling you that to reach a solution at some point, this apartheid regime of Israel should fall and the land should return to its owners, who actually have never owned it. But because as we said, Palestine has never existed.
No, the before Israel took it in 1967, the area that the left likes to call Palestine, and I've seen the Israeli border go around this place they like to call Palestine, but until 1967, when Israel claimed authority over that area, the Jordanians administered that area.
Yep. Yeah, it was called Transjordan at one point, I think, because it crossed the Jordan River, right?
Yeah.
And
Judea at one time.
Judea, exactly. And as we know, Judea and I think Samaria, the Samaritans, right?
Not so good Samaritans.
Not so good Samaritans. But in the Hamas chant, the one that they're chanting at the peace rallies against oppression all over the United States, and at college campuses is from the river to the sea, which means they want everything between the river, the Jordan River,
Right.
and the Mediterranean Sea to be theirs,
Which is
and
Israel.
which is Israel. Yeah,
Historically,
yeah. And they're
3,500
complaining
years.
35, and they're complaining because they won't let a bunch of people who just killed 1,200 Israelis out of their so-called open air prison in Gaza, so they can go and do more of it and finish
Yeah.
the job. So that's the circumstance, and we're relying on a media that apparently is literally rooting for the terrorists to give us information that turns out completely blew up a peace process that might have been beginning, or at least discussions and talks with Middle East leaders.
Yeah, yeah, at least some sort of talk about who's going to do what. I mean, it seems like a really good time to at least have a conversation because things can blow up, no pun intended, but
Yeah.
things blow up much greater than they already are there. And, the United States has committed not one, but two carrier groups to the Mediterranean. One's already there, one's on its way. And that's a pretty big military commitment. That's hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military gear and more than 10,000 of our soldiers there already. And I don't know, it could ignite, especially when you consider that Israel, for whatever reason, I would imagine because of their intelligence, is in fact evacuating their northern area and their border with Lebanon, which they've had skirmishes with before. It would seem to indicate that they have intel that the surrounding countries, whose ass they have kicked repeatedly over the years,
Yeah.
may very well make another run at it. Lebanon, Jordan, Syria. I don't know about Egypt, but I saw a video on Twitter that a guy responding to Israeli Arabs or Gazans, Transjordanians, saying that Israel does not exist. And the guy said, well, who's been kicking your ass in these wars then if they don't exist?
Really? I mean, they should conduct an immediate investigation to figure out how they kicked their own asses out of these territories. And they know that if they tried to do it again, it would be a lot worse. In fact, they can't do it because Israel is like, we'll just nuke you.
Yeah. Well, I think we've known probably for most of our adult life that, there's going to continue to be a war in that area. I mean, there's just no, Muhammad and Yahweh are just not gonna, they're not gonna make peace over there. It doesn't seem like so.
No, and they don't want to because there's an attempt. So here's the thing that Iran has said today. I didn't get to put this in the feed, but I did happen to see this and I thought that's totally relevant. So this paints a bigger picture. So Hezbollah is actually launching little ground attacks now across the northern frontier from Lebanon into Israel. If you want peace, are you launching attacks from Lebanon into Israel, or do you want to de-escalate? I mean, Hezbollah is going to last like an afternoon against the Israelis if they decided to go after them. There's going to be like no Hezbollah pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
So
and they've got to know that.
I think they do, which is why they're poking the bear. But here's the story. So you just said two carrier battle groups going there. The question is why? Because it doesn't take two United States carrier battle groups to go and do something to Hamas. It just doesn't.
No, it doesn't. No, I'm sure that one strike group could take out all of the combatants in the area.
And the Israelis have that, so they don't really need the United States to go do it. So really, this must be about other countries in the region. Hezbollah, which is essentially running most of the southern half of Lebanon, south of Beirut. But then the other country that's coming forward here is Iran. They seem to be issuing threats and deadlines to the United States and Israel. And so this is what has occurred today. Iran has threatens to drag the U.S. into a regional holy war. He said that the U.S. must be held responsible for this situation. He called Tuesday. He called for an immediate end to Israel's attacks on Gaza and vowed that Muslims would retaliate if the bombardment continues. So he appears to be speaking for all Muslims now. And there might be some reason to be concerned about that because apparently he and the Saudis are getting along better, whatever that means.
No, the Saudis have always been sponsoring this terror. You know they're paying for it out the back door. Qatar, Iran, Qatar and Iran, or the Saudis have far more money than the Iranians do.
They do. Although Iran and Saudi Arabia have kind of been, like this for a while. They got those guys, the Houthi rebels,
yeah,
missiles towards Riyadh and the airport there. There's been like a proxy war going on in Yemen between these two countries, but it looks like maybe this has taken a turn in a different direction, that they are suddenly getting along better. Right? This is just all accumulating because this is just showing how terrible and stupid the Brandon administration and Blinkety Blink's policy, the Secretary of State's policy is towards all of us. They are creating a situation that's going to spin out of control. And guess what they're going to have to do? Well, you don't have to guess. Pentagon readies 2,000 troops for region, has ordered 2,000 U.S. military personnel to respond to the fallout of Israel's war in Gaza. And they've extended the USS Ford's deployment. They're sending another carrier battle group, as you said there. I believe it's the Eisenhower. Yeah. And so they must be ramping up for something, which with these threats from Iran, it looks like this is actually a war that someone's trying to create. And Biden is, because they've screwed up so badly, are going to have to respond. They see it. They're going to have to be really tough because nobody believes them after Afghanistan that they're going to do anything.
Well, yeah. There's no show of force from the Brandon administration because the Brandon administration doesn't show force, and nobody's afraid of Joe Biden, and that makes it very, very dangerous, especially with two strike groups over there. I mean, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets, like I said before, and more than 10,000 lives over there. And there are military equipment over there that would be oppositional to us that can reach those strike groups. I'm not sure, what the right method is over there. I do think sending the strike groups makes sense because if they want a holy war, Mecca and Medina are just within a missile's launch.
Yeah. No, and I think those strike groups know how to defend themselves, although they could be. They do. But I think that and I tend to agree that either you put enough force in there to make it unthinkable that somebody should take certain actions, or don't do it at all. Don't put in just a little bit and then be vulnerable or.
Well, yeah. What my concern is that we're not there on an offensive mission. My concern is we might be sitting there like ducks. And I'm not sure what the military capabilities are over there, but bigger picture, we do know that when Iran or could be Lebanon or Syria or maybe even when we do know at least when Iran goes nuclear, if they haven't already, that they're going to do that they're going to try to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Thankfully, the United States has spent quite a bit of money producing their Iron Dome system over there. So hopefully, they're protected. But there's nothing like there was, when on 9/11. When GW was president. I mean, he went over there and said, we're going to hit you and kill you because you did this to us. Now, as it turns out, it probably should have been Saudi Arabia that he did, because many of those terrorists were Saudi Arabian nationals. And we know that Saudi Arabia is funding this through the back door with money that we give them for their oil. They're not stupid.
By the way, we don't have to give them for their oil because we are the global superpower for oil and gas, and we don't need them.
Yeah.
The Europeans might have problems, but we're set, except for the Brandon administration basically shutting down a huge portion of our oil and gas industry because they believe that the most dangerous thing going on in the world is climate change. And that's way more dangerous than, say, somebody trying to blow you up with missiles and bombs and terrorist attacks, which
which I'm sure we're going to see here, and pulling farther out, even a taller view, the world powers have been realigning. We're seeing alignments with China and Russia, BRICS, and I'm not sure the Brandon administration has a real handle on any of that, other than taking money from some of the people in exchange for whatever influence he was able to peddle at the time. So it's a kind of a tenuous geopolitical state we find ourselves in. I think my wife, I think it was my wife that said it. I think just yesterday, the day before, she goes, we've never been closer to large scale major war in my lifetime.
Quite possibly. Well, and I think that this is the byproduct of foolishness and weakness that now has caused people to think they're going to poke the bear. They're going to test this, which is what gets you into actual wars. The reason why we don't fight wars all the time is because people will be like, I'm not going to try anything against these guys.
Well,
they
yeah.
have the will and the means, and they're ready to do it. And they've also made it clear to us proactively that they're going to do something about this. And then everything de-escalates and this stuff never happens. So wind the clock back 4 years. That's what the world was like 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we weren't talking about any of this stuff.
No, we weren't. We weren't. Matter of fact, we were looking at peace in the Middle East for the first time in, I guess, many decades.
Yep.
But here you have it.
The National Security Advisor. So Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee is calling on the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, to step down. He doesn't have to step down. She can't make him step down. But Brandon could. And apparently he probably doesn't even know who the National Security Advisor is anymore, because they have to write it on a cue card and say, this is actually the National Security Advisor, and he's running all of this. And he says, don't fire me. You're not allowed. So this is probably where things are at now. But she pointed out that he is just like, first there was the JCPOA, that Iran nuclear deal, that's not served us well. It's been a disaster. They're just basically getting ready to test a nuclear weapon. They're very close.
They're going to test it in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, that might be the case. Then, of course, the way they've handled Hezbollah, the way they've handled, frankly, Saudi Arabia and some of these other countries that were heading in a different direction 4 years ago. The way he's coddled Iran and given them money, $6 billion. And now we've got dead Americans and more than 1,000 dead Israelis. And it looks like even their efforts to emergency handle what's going on is falling apart. They're just total victims now, leading the superpower of the United States. So she called on him to resign. I don't know. I think that it's time for some Democrats to think about calling for this. What do you think?
Well, I think. I don't need to just think it. We've seen it in the news. Democrats find themselves in a peculiar situation because to not support Israel is to support terrorism. However, the left, traditionally doesn't like Israel and will support the so-called Palestinians, what I call the Israeli Arabs and Gazans, over Israel any day of the week. And so, they're really They're really finding themselves in a quandary, and I'm not sure that it makes any difference on the world stage. I mean, ultimately, the commander in chief is the one who's either going to put forward a strong foot or not, and Joe Biden can't do that.
And he can't. Worse yet, even if he tries, he can't convince anybody that it's a strong foot. And that's the thing. It's usually you don't. If the more you have to go out and convince somebody of something, the less true it's going to be. Actually, until you expend huge amounts of resources and maybe people. That's a fact. It might be too late for him to actually convince people that he's a tough guy.
Well, yeah, he's not a tough guy. You're not a tough guy until you prove you're a tough guy.
Yeah. Well, and he took whatever benefit of the doubt he got and he threw it away in August of 2021. But
well, yeah, and those and many of those arms apparently have ended up over in Gaza and probably in southern Lebanon and probably in Jordan and Syria.
Yeah, I'm sure that the Iranians somehow cut some deals with the Taliban to make sure that we're at least fighting some of our own weapons in the.
Well, yeah. You know, the Taliban, I mean, they're a reasonably small force. They had an overstock sale. They were selling that shit to anybody who wanted to buy it, to raise cash, because you need cash to run a terrorist organization. So
yeah, it's a back to jihad sale.
Yeah,
it's all you can.
Whatever the Muslim equivalent is to Christmas.
It all's got to go, and it's got to go now. But back here in Portland, the Multnomah County Commission, who we already covered yesterday with their fabulous argument about whether they should condemn terrorism or not and support Israel, have once again revised their previous decision. They've decided to light up the Morrison Bridge in white from Tuesday.
Whoa! White.
Well, here's what it means.
White is bad.
Well, it was lit up in blue and white for, I think, about 24 to 48 hours in support of Israel. And then once they apparently felt that they had gotten over the 1,200 deaths and hundreds of people kidnapped, they want to spend the next 5 days saying how sorry they feel for Palestinians being killed in the war. The Palestinians in Gaza who voted to have a government run by the people who killed 1,200 Israelis and just tried to blame a rocket that they fired at themselves for a bunch of these deaths. And so Chair Vega Peterson issued what sounds like an actual strong statement saying that she calls it a terrifying call to remove more than 1 million people from northern Gaza with only 24 hours notice. So she doesn't want them to have people evacuate what has become a war zone. She doesn't want them to evacuate. She wants Israel to do nothing.
Yeah.
And
well,
then
apparently, yeah, their whole thing is there's nowhere to go.
There's nowhere to go. Or if you go to southern Gaza, I guess it's not great either. But she said, I unequivocally condemn the indiscriminate use of munitions with regard for civilian casualties. Collective punishment against populations for actions of a terrorist organization violates international law and democratic values we cherish in Multnomah County and the United States.
A terrorist organization that runs their so-called country.
Yeah. Well, and remember when she issued, remember her really strong statement condemning Antifa using these exact same words? Yeah, me neither. So she's now using her incredible executive powers to change the colors of the Morrison Bridge for the next 5 days, while she apparently she must have just condemned Hamas just now. That's all I can think. Yeah. If it's the indiscriminate use of munitions, and what they should do is they should have a display on the Morrison Bridge of a rocket aimed backwards, like aimed at the bridge, saying we want to condemn this, which is blasting yourself with a rocket.
Right.
Happens. So anyway,
well, you should at least put out some clarification that the white light's got nothing to do with white people, because
that's right.
Although white people are bad, And you don't want people driving across the bridge thinking, "Oh, we're celebrating white people. It's
Yeah,
White People Heritage Month or something."
yeah. It's a white power
Yeah,
celebration.
I'm confused because Whitey's bad. I'm white. I know I'm bad, but I live in Portland, so I'm kind of good. I vote
Yeah.
Democrat.
No, we have international stupidity spanning the globe. It is everywhere, and there's no way Multnomah County is going to want to be left out of that. Well, shifting gears, so there is some news from DC today. So there was a vote for the House speakership. Jim Jordan was the nominee, and he was the only one nominated by Republicans, and then Democrats nominated Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader and election denier, 2020 election denier, or sorry, 2016 election denier. And Democrats voted in unison, 212 votes. 217 are needed for the speakership. Jim Jordan got, let's see, he received 200 votes. There were about 20 Republicans who voted for people that weren't nominated. There were 6 cast for former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. 7 Republicans voted for Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who pulled his own name from the running last week. And Lee Zeldin got 3, who's not a congressman, who ran for he's a former congressman who ran for governor in New York and lost narrowly to Hochul, whose name sounds kind of like if you've got a bad throat virus or something and you cough. Hochul. Anyway, and then Mike Garcia, I don't even know who that is. Majority Whip Tom Emmer, Tom Cole, and Tom Massey. So they all kind of threw away these votes, and actually, our own Lori Chavez Dreamer was one of the votes for Kevin McCarthy. And this happens on first ballots sometimes. People say, "Look, I'm just not going to vote on this ballot. I'm going to do it on a subsequent ballot. I'm remaining loyal. I want to send some message about where I stand on this."
Right.
The question right now is
And also, I would like to get something.
Yeah. It might be, hey, I have like some appointment to a committee or whatever. It could be. I don't know. I haven't really seen these statements from most of the folks that voted this way. There was only one that I saw. Apparently, one guy, who was it? Ken Buck. No, it was somebody who voted for who voted for Tom Emmer. He said, "Oh yeah, it was Ken Buck from Colorado." He said, "Speaker is the worst job in America." So he voted for Tom Emmer because I don't like Tom Emmer.
That's a good one.
actually funny. But I suspect that we'll see maybe some more people shift their votes, but he's got to get 17 out of those 20, and there's easily 4 or 5 that say they will never vote for Jim Jordan. So I don't know what's going to happen, but we've seen it take multiple votes before. It took Kevin McCarthy 15 votes. One of the so there's going to be another vote tomorrow, and they're going to work. He's going to go talk to people, and he's got people that are supporting him, including Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise, at least in terms of votes. And there's an Oklahoma congressman, Josh Brecheen, who predicted that there would be defectors. And he said most of them are voting because they think Jim Jordan is actually too conservative. There wasn't any evidence cited as to why they believe he's too conservative. By and large, the Republican Party is conservative. Nobody said that Kevin McCarthy wasn't conservative. They had other issues with him and his leadership. But so they say that that's part of what's going on here. So before, it was the Freedom Caucus wouldn't vote for somebody because he said that they didn't like the deal making or thought that they weren't conservative enough, etc. Now it's Jim Jordan is too conservative. But a lot of the folks that are voting, I think, against Jim Jordan right now are ones that said that we got to get a speaker as quickly as possible, and we got to fix the dysfunction and get things done. So I don't know how long some of the folks that have taken that position can hold out on this, because they actually had the opposite opinion a short time ago when they supported Kevin McCarthy.
There's another vote tomorrow, correct?
There's another vote tomorrow. There's a funny story. One of the people that voted for someone else and not for Jim Jordan, Representative Don Bacon from Nebraska, a congressman from Nebraska. Apparently, he in a hot mic moment was
yeah, I heard that
by Brian Kilmeade, a anchor and interviewer on Fox News, but off camera, actually called him a dumbass, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of backstories.
I heard a great clip today. Apparently, there's somebody who's conservative that's running in Canada, maybe for prime minister or something. I didn't catch the names. I was on the radio. But the reporter was saying, so, everybody thinks you're kind of, right wing. Why do you think people should vote for you? And he goes, who says I'm right wing? And the reporter goes, well, there's people that's, that think you're kind of like Trump. Well, who are they? The guy says. And the guy says, well, I'm sure there's some. And so the guy says, well, let me rephrase the question. Why should Canadian voters vote for you? And he goes, common sense. That was it. Those were all his responses. It was throw it back, and I just, that kind of reminded me of, the media, the way they like to frame questions, here's my statement, and then I'll put a question mark at the end of it. So the guy, whoever the candidate was just brilliant, and just completely took all the wrapping off the guy's question, where the guy just had to ask, why should we vote for you? And he said, common sense.
It's perfect, because that's what these reporters do, especially the Republicans. They used to do it to Trump all the time. They would just say, oh, people say this and that about you. And it's like, so said, who?
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah, and the reporter says, well, you're taking pages out of the Trump playbook. And the guy goes, which page? That was great. I need to find it and post it on here.
Well, I mean, we see it with Hamas in Gaza, the Associated Press guy. We see it in Canada with this other reporter. Reporters they're just sort of,
well, they're activists. They work for the DNC or whatever the hell it is in Canada, or whatever the hell it is in any Western European nation. They don't journal, they spin. I mean, it's spin from the minute you go. You hear it all the time. Everybody that listens, everybody watching the show, you hear it all the time on all the news blurbs on the radio. The news breaks on the radio. Statements always prefaced with some sort of lefty spin, and it doesn't matter which radio station it is, and it's just constant. And it's funny when some guy like this, and of course Trump is very famous for it, pushes back on it.
Well, and it can happen with all different pockets of the media. Here's actually a great story that's an example of this. So this is the Daily Caller. They say, exclusive source, Scalise refused to give speech nominating Jordan for speaker as race intensifies. That's a story from today. But then they contacted Steve Scalise's office to ask about this. And the response from the spokesperson there was, Leader Scalise has been the only candidate throughout the process who has publicly declared he will be supportive of whomever the conference nominates for speaker. His position hasn't changed. He voted for Jim Jordan on the floor, and he will continue to do so. The caller asked specifically about the nominating speech of Scalise's refusing to whip for Jordan, to which the spokesperson said, not true. He has spoken to members of Jim's on Jim's behalf, and you can see that many Scalise allies flipped to Jordan. So I guess It didn't. That story didn't
Yeah.
survive confrontation with a factual response.
Or, yeah, it was a headline. It was a headline, and everything else was just manufactured out of whole cloth. And that's the media throughout the Western world today in 2020.
And they waste a lot of time people responding to things that aren't true.
Right.
No wonder we don't have time for what is true. Shifting gears here, we have a really interesting story that just emerged. This would normally get forgotten with all this other stuff going, but as it turns out, the Department of Health and Human Services and several federal judges are compelling the federal employees, and in the case of the judges, litigants in cases to identify others by their preferred gender pronouns, which is raising kind of First Amendment and judicial impartiality issues, that you're compelling speech out of people, and you're doing so in the case of federal employees or people who simply filed cases and showed up in court to have those cases heard. The Health and Human Services mandate came out on Wednesday and explicitly refers to something called National Coming Out Day, which is, of course, recognized by a dozen Democratic congressional members, which means it's probably an official national holiday, and we didn't even know it. The mandate appears to be based on an Office of Personnel Management guidance document from March that claims agencies are encouraged to create or update gender identity policies, but implies it's not optional, citing President Biden's executive order, which apparently overrides the Constitution. The Supreme Court's arguably inapplicable Bostock ruling. 5 federal judges in the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals explicitly require litigants to use selected pronouns of counsel, litigants, and witnesses in court, and another 2 pressured them to do so. Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach told Chief Judge Jerome Holmes, appointed by George W. Bush in an October 6th letter, the practices not only frustrate maximum clarity and accuracy in court filings, but also implicate the rights of lawyers who reject subjective pronouns for both religious and non-religious reasons and imply a prejudgment on issues in litigation, such as challenges to state laws on gender identity.
Oh yeah, well, not to mention the massacre of the rules of the English language.
Yeah, it's called, it's called incorrect
language
grammar.
Dictates what a pronoun is. Language and gender, plumbing. But unfortunately, of course, the left does this all the time. They shift the argument. It's kind of like the Palestinians. Well, Palestinians have a right to exist. Well, what the hell is a Palestinian? Well, from Palestine. Well, where's Palestine? Well, where Israel is. And so now we have the shifting of the argument from these are the rules of the English language and gender. These are the absolute immutable rules of biology. To now it's a different it's a different argument. Whatever I will make the English language do whatever I want it to do. And you take that to its logical extension, and you have a country that can't communicate.
Well, and you have a country that doesn't actually have any rules to its language, which is a great way to start getting people to want to not have any rules at all. That makes sense, or that follow the Constitution in any way, shape, or form. But here's the video. You can actually watch the gender identity guidelines video that was put out by Health and Human Services, which they've removed from where it was originally on the HHS website and made it impossible to find doing a search on the Health and Human Services website. Oops. And so apparently this is probably going to turn into a court case. And the question is, in today's judicial system, will this be heard in the court of somebody who is requiring their employees to use and litigants to use the preferred gender pronouns of the people involved in the case?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're having problems figuring all this out, let's just reestablish the rules of the English language and then go ahead and institute my policy, which is I do not respond to anyone that tells me what their pronouns are, even if they're correct. Because I don't need to know that.
I don't need to know it.
I learned it in school.
Yeah, there's a couple of friends of mine. One likes to her pronouns are she fab, and another is is her pronouns are her pronoun is obvious. That's her pronoun.
Yeah, yeah,
And mine is FJB and LGB are my
yeah.
pronouns. So
Well, I remember when I instituted this policy, the first time I instituted it was somebody sent me an email and they included their pronouns. And I did not respond. It was a government agency and they wanted some information from me and I just did not respond. And I'm not going to. If you include your pronouns in any communication with me, I'm going to assume that there's no reason for me to try to communicate with you because we don't speak the same language.
yeah, I know. I need a translator. That's right. I need
Yeah,
a woke translator to step in and help us understand what is this.
yeah.
Translate it into English, please. I learned it. I already know it. I don't need someone to change it for me right now. It's crazy. But I don't. There's another language I don't speak. I don't speak the language of mealy mouthed people in Oregon who don't seem to understand that if you take stolen funds from customers in an unregulated industry overseen by a U.S. senator that is the chairman of that committee, and you turn it into political
Well, money
donations,
laundering is what it's called.
you turn it into political donations that benefit the people that that chairman is raising money for, and then it may actually change the outcome of an election. Sounds pretty illegal to me.
$500,000 in Oregon.
So here's what's happened. There's a court case going on right now. There's a guy named Nishad Singh. He's the guy who, after the information was corrected by the Oregon Democrats a month after the donation last fall during the election of $500,000 to the Democratic Party of Oregon, he's actually on trial, and he testified yesterday how he and other FTX officials, FTX was the cryptocurrency company that was donating loads of money to Democrats. He said FTX officials, he and those officials fraudulently funneled stolen customer funds to political campaigns. So they stole it from their customers, just seized it, and then wired it through a front company that they happen to control or own to these politicians and to the Democratic Party of Oregon. Now, this case is actually about a case relating to another state. Is it Alabama? It's another state, but it's also Delaware, and it's for a smaller amount, only about $20,000. But what they found is they're getting inside this whole thing, the whole straw donor thing that they did, and he testified that he was a fraudulent straw donor for these contributions in 2022. His testimony confirmed what prosecutors said, that those donations are made using stolen FTX customer funds. And he's pleading guilty to these charges. Of course, that's for some leniency, right? And maybe some, I don't know if there's some immunity for some charges. We don't know. But the feds are trying to get Sam Bankman-Fried, the ugliest man on the planet, on charges that he was actually overseeing this whole thing and responsible for it, as well as fueling his lifestyle, which apparently involved like owning part of an island and partying all the time. But he was a donor to all of these folks, and they just break this down. They literally say, this is what we did. There's internal text communications inside their company. The feds have all of that. We don't have it. But it's laying the groundwork for what should be possible to apply to the same donation, same kind of donation made 2 weeks prior, but 25 times larger to the state of Oregon. This report goes on to explain that there's actually a reason to look at why this was specifically targeting Oregon, because this donation dwarfed the donations that were made anywhere else in the country. $500,000 to one entity a month before election day, before elections in Oregon. And by the way, prior prior to the application of this money to the election by the Democrat Party of Oregon, mostly for get out the vote and that kind of thing. Christine Drazen in many polls is actually up a point or two, and she lost by 3.5%. So the person who apparently this is an email that is now public record of a consultant that worked with Ron Wyden. Supposedly all things Ron Wyden, according to the people involved with this. That person was talking to somebody who was a guy named Mark something or other, who was all things FTX. And there's an exchange in this email about how they're going to make sure that the wire credentials for the 500K to Oregon's coordinated campaign could be pulled off. Now, there isn't anything that shows Ron Wyden saying, yes, do it. But he happens to was then, and still is now, the chairman of the powerful finance committee that, guess what it oversees? It oversees the cryptocurrency markets. And so, and this money went to the Democrat Party of Oregon to help ensure the outcome of a gubernatorial election. Of course, it easily could have affected as well the race in the 6th congressional district for Andres Salinas. And when you piece this stuff together, it starting to look like a slam dunk that they're going to be able to attribute who this was to, that there was an intention to influence or benefit Wyden, even if he didn't know about it, because Wyden was actually trying to help the party fundraise for this election, which is normal. Sure. They just don't usually do it this way.
Well, I'll tell you what, you can mark it. You can mark what I'm saying right now and say you heard it here first. But I think if everything were known about the whole FTX organization, that it was started to do this, to funnel money to Democrats in a critical election year, because it was a lot of freaking money.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise me if DNC, somebody at the DNC said, hey, let's mint a crypto coin and let's scrape that cash off for campaign contributions. And they got a willing participant in Bankman-Fried, and he lived the high life as his reward. Scraped. It was a lot of money, if I remember correctly. Wasn't it tens and tens of millions of dollars, if not more? Yeah. No, it was. Yeah. And scraped it all off, and everybody looked the other way until it was time to pay the piper, when nothing balanced anymore, and it was clear that everything FTX related was going down in flames. And I think you might see this. I think you might get some confirmation of this if you see him get off fairly easily.
Yeah, and what could be better than to try and loot a company that was going out of business?
I think they started the company.
Yeah,
I'm serious. I think they started the company to loot it for campaign donations, because Bankman-Fried had no credentials.
No, and if you see his hair, he has worse than those credentials. He actually looks like the biggest idiot of all time.
And if you look at the circles that he ran in, the Clintons, Bezos, all those people that, the dinner, that the K5 dinner, and all the people that's, kind of came around and raised up FTX, because there's a million, or not a million, but there's maybe 1,000. There's a lot of crypto coins out there. Most of them are just shit. Matter of fact, I'm a crypto investor, and we call them shit coins. And FTX is one of those.
And that's what they're worth pretty much right now, most of them, right?
Well, yeah, FTX is worth just a little less than shit. And but there was a huge group of influential leftist Democrats who surrounded FTX and gave them credibility.
Yes. And access. Like, he visited the White House multiple times.
Yeah.
That's on the record, right? Sam Bankman-Fried could get into the White House.
Yeah.
Who did he talk to?
Yeah.
What did they say?
Yeah.
Where's the transcript? Probably none. But there is an interesting thing going on, because I just posted a couple of these stories. The Wall Street Journal covered it. There's a couple of other outlets that did. There's a really good sort of intrepid gumshoe guy in Eastern Oregon named Jeff Eager that's covering this. And Jeff Eager also posted on September 1st a story about how he has filed an FEC complaint, which involves Val Hoyle, the congresswoman from the 4th Congressional District, and LaMotta. And he says in his story, Hoyle may have accepted and unlawfully retained cash contributions from LaMotta founders, adding to her growing list of first-term scandals. It's really worth reading this. I don't think I saw his article about this, because it was mostly Sophie Peel and Willamette Week that I've seen. But this guy is actually not only taking what Willamette Week said, but he's piecing together with other sources of information that he's managed to obtain and posted here, including email correspondence. And he's noticing that there happens to be evidence that a $5,800 donation that Hoyle's campaign made to a Democrat-allied nonprofit, Oregon Tradeswomen, happened to match pretty perfectly a donation that Hoyle accepted and retained until May 2023 of $5,800 in cash contributions from the cannabis company LaMotta. Federal law prohibits making campaign contributions in excess of $100 and requires candidates to return cash contributions exceeding $100 to promptly return such excess to the contributor. So this is the thing. You can't make gargantuan cash contributions to federal candidates. You can't.
Well, you can.
No, it's illegal.
It's just that they don't get recorded.
Federal law prohibits, right? And so, but now they were actually dumb enough to go and do this $5,800 donation to this Democrat allied nonprofit, which of course they should look into who's that and did they know it was coming. Right. It was right around the time that, of course, the now disgraced Secretary of State Shemia Fagan resigned. And this is all starting to gradually come. And this is the same Val Hoyle who spent 8 months ignoring or pretending she didn't know she had received a message from the Bureau of Labor and Industry asking for their public records back off of her private phone. And now she says she's going to go ahead and she's got this. She's going to take care of it. Last week, so late August, Sophie Peel with Willamette Week reported that Hoyle sat on official bully communications on her cell phone for 8 months, despite the request from the agency. 8 months. Virtually the entire tenure she's been in Congress.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, don't forget that the $500,000 that was spent also helped assist Val Hoyle win the Democratic nomination. Making sure that Hoyle, who won the Democratic nomination, would win the 4th Congressional District race. So that's a get out the vote thing too. That's the Democratic Party of Oregon. So there's all this stink that's been spread around, and the cover up is still happening. And it doesn't just stop there, because when you thought, hey, it's just LaMotta and Val Hoyle and FTX, there's a report that was commissioned by the Department of Justice, and this report came out last week, that finds that the former Secretary of State Shemia Fagan didn't influence the audit's outcome, the audit that apparently was the OLCC audit, but said auditors failed to properly weigh the public perception of her outside work, which actually doesn't have anything to do with the OLCC audit. It just has, this sounds like obvious obfuscation where they're trying to, why would they try to protect her now? Because the more they find out about her and what was going on, the more they're going to find out about other people and what was going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll have plenty of shows to talk about between now and 2024 about all of the corruption, and we do need to, continue to talk about it, because we forget. Nobody that's viewing our show probably currently is going to vote for any of those people, but they probably know people. So we'll have to revisit this and make sure that it's fresh in everybody's mind. But we know that Oregon Democrats, are taking greasy, dirty, dark money all the time.
They are, and they control the levers of government that help them whitewash and cover it up.
Yeah.
When they should be investigating it. And
yeah.
And in fact, the Secretary of State, the one who took over, that's filling out the Shemia Fagan term, refuses to take the audit down. That's been completely tainted by this whole thing, even though she's been urged to review it, which we'll see if she ever does that. Now, it's a fundamentally corrupt system, and they're covering up for it, but let's just keep at it, because it's got to be a campaign issue. It has to.
Yeah, I agree. People in CD4 need to know.
Well, thank you, Mr. Still wondering where Palestine is, or where Val Hoyle's cash contribution went, and and I am wondering that too. We'll be back tomorrow night with another episode of The Captive Audience. I think it'll be Sunny and Don. Thanks for joining me here, David. And
thank you, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, and share the show with everyone you can. We will see you again We'll see you next week. Well, David, you'll be back on Friday with Don, I think, and then I'll see you next week on The Captive Audience. Have a good night.